Hello again. I am Sable and I am your host of the Full Out Healing show and podcast. Today is this is the third official episode and day 5 of 100 Days of Truth. Now, as I've done with the previous episodes, I'm going to talk about this topic or this kind of thought or idea in like past, present, and future, like the way I relate to it over time. And so, so today's episode is called I Didn't Want to Face Myself. And I already feel so exposed talking about this because it feels, maybe I'll get into it and then I'll stumble into why this feels so exposing. It all does. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so I didn't want to face myself. Okay, so what I thought about this in the past. And so I remember, after a particularly violent incident where I almost lost my life, so many thoughts were swirling in my head. And the thoughts that were really prominent were, I can't be in a domestic violence situation. What does that mean about who I am? If this is true, then I am not who I think I am. I am an imposter. I am a fraud. And if that's true, and I didn't want that to be true. I didn't want to think that this entire way that I thought of myself wasn't real because of this situation. And in terms of my feelings, I, at the time, felt shame for allowing this to happen, which I understand that it's not something you allow, but this is how I felt about it at the time. I felt shame for allowing it to happen. I honestly felt pathetic for staying, for wanting to stay, for loving her anyway. I felt like such an idiot. Like, I felt so fucking stupid and so dumb for believing her, for denying myself, and for rejecting facts. And I felt disgusted with myself for ever accepting this, like in the moments where, in the pockets of space where I could entertain these things, these are all of the feelings that came up, all while in the midst of trying to figure out what to do. And, this feeling, there's so much of this feeling throughout this entire experience. And of course, shame came up again. I felt this shame so deep that I literally never wanted to be like seen in the world ever again. Like, whenever certain things would happen, and I knew, or I couldn't, where there was a possibility where the neighbors could hear, I felt so ashamed. I literally wanted to just be like consumed into a hole and to never appear. I remember thinking, like, would it ever be possible for me to literally never make eye contact with a neighbor ever again? Like, can I change my schedule? Can I do, that's how deep the shame was. And then the narrative that I had around this was, I was telling myself, how can you be a feminist? How can you be a champion for social justice if I didn't like if I wasn't even applying these principles to my own life, how could I be any of those things, right? Like, and the I guess like the ugliness of that question is why I was afraid that I was an imposter and a fraud all along, you know? And something I believed at the time was that, kind of in line with this is like experiencing intimate partner violence means that I'm not who I said I am. And it means that who I present myself in the world, like, or what I say I care about and what I say I value can't possibly be true because if I'm experiencing intimate partner violence. Another belief I had at the time was that, people who experience intimate partner violence are broken and don't love themselves. And if I felt like if that's true about me, that makes me a fraud. And I felt embarrassed I felt embarrassed that someone would think that about me, that I was broken and didn't love myself, like especially like the not loving myself when I thought I'd done. There's so much in my life that I have done to try to accept myself, and there's so much I've spoken about that has to do with, I think love in some way. And I just felt so like ashamed and embarrassed about like what this experience is saying about me. Now, that was, when I was in it at different points, and even a little bit like as I was processing, like those were a lot of the thoughts and the feelings that I had to work through. Those were the beliefs and narratives that I really had to like disentangle and like interrogate and like get curious about, because it's really interesting. I was just surprised that, I remember feeling surprised thinking that, that someone else's choice to be violent meant something about me. And my interpretation of that, and my interpretation of what I was experiencing as I experienced it, the choices I made in that context, I had a lot of judgment for that. And this is where I'm kind of at with it now. So like in the present tense, I don't know why I keep saying tense, like I'm talking verbs or whatever, but like today, now, I recognize that it was really, really hard for me to come to terms with my reality and to come to terms with that I was living with intimate partner violence, because all of like the judgment I'd honestly internalized about people who experience intimate partner violence, like, and I really internalized this belief and this understanding that only a certain type of person is in that situation. And I think that's part of why it was really hard to reconcile, because I had deeply held misinformation about like what this is, what it looks like, and who experiences it. And it's like all of society's judgments about survivors, like I internalized it as a survivor. And so it's like, that's just like a lot to work through if you're the one who's experienced it and has survived it and are trying to like move forward from it, also say something that I understand now is that living with constant fear and not really living with the constant threat of danger, right? Because there were good times and bad times, and there was always like sort of a sense of like waiting for the shoe to drop, and then when it finally did, it was like I internalized it back on myself, or like, oh, you shouldn't have gotten like comfortable or whatever. That's a whole nother video. But like I now recognize that like literally just constantly living with the constant threat of fear. No, living in fear with the constant threat of danger, that had an impact on my biochemistry, my brain, and like it altered my sense of reality, you know? Like there's no way for that to not. And I also recognize that because of that, like what I conceived of as was possible changed under those circumstances. And, you know, just what you believe is possible if you're constantly afraid versus if you have like a relatively sense of safety and security, they're two vastly different things. And not only that, I look back at it and I think about, even with the altered sense of like what I could perceive as possible, even though it was different, and even though from a place of safety, it's easy to look back and judge it, right? I now know that even under those circumstances, the choices I made, the sense that I was able to figure out, like how my nervous system responded, kept me alive. Like it worked because I'm here. And I think that's really important to say, because when it comes to like navigating violence in relationships or anything that's unhealthy, I think the mainstream response is like the only healthy thing to do is to leave. And if you don't leave, you any choice that's outside of that earns and merits judgment and shame. And that is tough and complicated because when you live with violence, what is safe is altered, right? Like we know, I'm not gonna get into the specific of statistics, but like the most dangerous time in a relationship with intimate partner violence is when someone leaves. That is the most dangerous time with the highest, where you see the most escalation. That is potentially deadly, right? And so if that's a truth, you know, throw statistics aside, like there was some part of my subconscious of my nervous system that understood that. And, you know, with that context, made the choices that made sense for me at the time. And, like that, I guess all of which, as I'm saying, is I used to, when I got out, I was so judgmental and I had so much shame for myself for like how long I stayed and that I was in that circumstance and that I let all these things happen. And I've eventually come to a place to like have compassion with myself, with my brain, with my nervous system, and to respect the ways that I navigated and the choices that I made with the resources that I had. And that's really, being able to accept that and respect myself for that has been critical to like moving forward with a strong, like while I'm building a strong sense of self and learning to trust myself again. And that was a huge thing, that this experience totally wrecked, exposed, is I really struggled to trust myself again. And I really had to come to and eventually just choose a different understanding of myself as a person and the choices I made at the time, in order to find a way to move through this world in a way where I can trust myself and therefore live the life that I want to live, and where I can, with self-trust is everything, with self-trust, like there's life and expansiveness, right? Instead of constantly just living in the shadow of this experience. And so I really had to just have compassion for myself, my former self, and the context she was in, even despite all of the muck and all of the narratives that I had internalized that had gotten in the way of that. Which it also ultimately comes down to, like, yes, you might be saying you're talking all of this stuff around, like, you respect this, or like you're at peace with it. And the answer is hell yeah. I'm literally alive today right now doing this video because of every single choice I made has allowed me to be alive in this moment. And I'm so fucking grateful for that. And that deserves some damn respect. And it really just boils down to that, is how I'm relating to it today. I also understand that I'm human, that I'm not broken, I'm not dumb, I'm not wrong for wanting love and not being able to discern or recognize or distinguish that what I was experiencing wasn't that. And I also know and understand, I also forgive myself for judging myself and for judging every thought and feeling that ever made me question, like, if I was like, made me question being a fraud or an imposter, because honestly, that it's torturous to like really get elbow deep in that muck. And I've come through it with such and the healing experiences around it. I just have such a strong sense of like who I am. I know that shit cannot be taken away from me. And I like that experience, like I just know who the fuck I am, and I don't regret anything, or I don't judge all the thoughts, feelings, and choices that brought me to this moment of knowing who I am and loving her and choosing her and just being unapologetically her. And so that's how I think about it. And so the narrative that I hold about this, I didn't want to face myself today, is that I now hold and accept that experiencing violence that I did not consent to is not a reflection of my identity, my values, or my beliefs. Full stop. It literally has nothing to do with that. And I genuinely questioned that for a really long time, and now I just feel very clear. Like that's the truth of the matter. I also understand that, like, I never really knew what safety was, which this one kind of shocked me, because for the first time, I was astonished that safety was so unfamiliar to me. And I think the first time I felt like fully, like I remember the first time I've ever felt safe in my life. And it was a few months ago when I was like in my own space, in my own apartment, and I had control of the space and my time, and I could move around however I wanted to, and I was just like, oh, this is what it feels like to be safe. And that's important for me to note, because one thing people love talking about when it comes to talking about unhealthy, toxic, or abusive relationships is like, look out for the red flags, look out for the red flags, right? I now understand and accept that I did not have the capacity to recognize a red flag, because I've lived my life in like a red sea. Everything is red. And so a flag was just a piece of fabric blowing in the wind. You know, red flags, they can alert you. They have the ability to alert you when everything else relative around it is not red and is not, and so it's an event, it's an alert. And I forgive myself and I'm compassionate with myself, because I recognize, like, damn, I've never known safety. And that was something I judged myself for staying when it was unsafe. And I look back and I was like, damn, I didn't even know what it meant to be safe. Like, on every level, emotionally, physically, my inner world was in a safe place. Just in every realm. Like I just didn't understand what safety was. And so I've been able, like, with appreciation and acceptance of that, I've been able to really forgive myself and release the judgment, because, this is something Ayanna Van Zant says all the time that I love. And it's that it's the idea that it's unloving and unkind to hold yourself to something, to judge yourself or criticize yourself for something you never knew how to do. And like, I never knew what safety was. I didn't know how to create it, how to protect it, none of that. I'm learning that now, and I feel fierce as fuck about it today. And even then, that's like a continuous journey. But yeah, I no longer judge myself and criticize myself for something I just didn't know how to do. Another belief I have now that I didn't understand, so those are the narratives that I hold now. A belief that I have is that experiencing intimate partner violence means, or the fact that I'm going to talk about me, right? The fact that I experience intimate partner violence means that I experienced a breach of trust, a violation of boundaries, and that I lived, and that living that not only did I live with violence, but also what was scary too was the absence of it and the constant threat of violence. And I experienced that with someone with whom I trusted, who I was vulnerable with, someone who I loved, and someone who I wanted a life with. It's not the stranger danger that we alert kids about in the street. That's not, experiencing violence at the hands of someone who is that just close. I understand that. Like, that's what I experienced. I also believe that I was never broken. I just didn't know how to love myself. And ironically, this journey, leaving sort of like being on this the healing journey itself has taught me how to love myself. And I'm continuing to learn how to do so along the way. And it's actually really nice. Like, I love learning how to love myself. Um, and in order to enjoy it, there are a lot of other old beliefs and narratives that I had to release because they don't coincide with it, right? And like one big belief is that I now believe, know, and understand that I am worthy and deserving of my own time, energy, and resources, right? And with embracing and I deserve those first in my life. And accepting that today means that, like, with accepting that, it's easy to love myself and easy to learn how to care for little Sable because I believe that. But in the past, it created an immense conflict because there was never enough for me and whatever other person. In any situation in my life, it was always hard to put me first because I didn't believe I deserved the best of me first. But that was then. This is now, y'all. It's a new day. And so the future. All right. This is what I hope for the future. So honestly, this is, I guess I'm speaking to survivors, but I'm speaking to survivors and the people in their lives who say that they care about them and who want to show up for them, right? I'm really hoping that in the future that there can be, there's this statistic that it takes 6 to 7 times to leave in an abusive relationship. In my experience, I found that to be true. And what I hope for is, I hope that you can have compassion for yourself for times number 1 through 6. You deserve that compassion, and not only that, like, it's so hard to I'll say this. I hope you have self-compassion for your times 1 through 6, whether you're in those times now or whether those times happened in the past. And I also hope for you that you have the safety needed to compassionately love all of yourselves, like every version of you, the version of you in this very minute, the version of you that went back, time them or whatever. Like, I hope for you that you can find the safety to, love every version of you, because every version of you has kept you alive, and that matters. And I guess my desire, and this is like this part is like beyond survivors. This is like the people around them in society. Like, I really desire that, I really wish people would, or I hope, no, I'll use the word desire. I desire for people to stop acting like it's their job to tell survivors to get out. And like it's their job to make them seem or feel weak, or to create, I also wish people would stop placing value judgments on the choices that survivors make. And not only that, make them undeserving of support based off of the value judgments you've made off of that, right? survivors need support, not just when they leave, they need support times 1 through 6. And however they relate to that matters. And you popping up in their life being like, hey, like, do this is not going to help anyone. Like, that's something people love. People learn about intimate partner violence, and I've noticed like there's like understandable outrage of like, how could this happen? Why don't they just leave? And I really wish people would instead ask, like, why don't abusers just stop? Like, why, like, what kind of solutions would we be able to generate if instead of focusing on the complicated choices, or instead of focusing on and reducing the nature of the complicated choices survivors make, like, what if you poured that energy into thinking about like what harm doers are doing, how to hold them accountable, and create consequences and discomfort for the fucked up choice of harming another human? It's just a thought. I also desire, and I hope that that if you're supporting someone who's a survivor, and like also I hope this for our society as well, that there is I'm really hoping for like safe, compassionate spaces that allow survivors to be where they are so that they can connect with themselves, process how they feel, make decisions for themselves, and why? Because that ultimately disrupts the, the narratives and beliefs that prolong and extend those 1 to 6 times before the last time, so to speak. It's I guess it's an invitation to think differently. I think it's an invitation. What I'm offering you, ally, or society, or whatever, is an invitation to think more expansively about the journey of being a survivor, and to think strategically about, well, where, at what point in that journey are you intersecting with, and what, based off of where the survivor is in their journey, even as simple as, are they even identifying as a survivor? I know I didn't for the longest time, and like, you could not have told me otherwise, because of everything I said in the first half of the video. But I think for people who are wanting to show up and as allies, or taking allied action, to think about where in the survivor journey are you showing up, and what is most useful to that survivor at that point in the journey. And to consider that the answer to that question is outside of the heroic saving of a person. And if you're finding that you're attached to a specific, not necessarily a specific outcome, but if you're attached to that support looking a certain way, then I really invite you to think about, like, okay, what relationship does that ideal and image in your mind have with where a survivor happens to be? And to what extent is that supportive? To what extent does that create space for a survivor? To what extent does it maybe reinforce certain notions about people who experience intimate partner violence and their choices and all these other things? It's just an invitation, you know? You can take it, you can put it down. The choice is yours. I'm just here to share my thoughts and my healing journey, and that's what I've done. So thank you for listening. I can't believe it. This is the end of the 3rd episode. I will see you tomorrow with episode, oh my gosh, number 4. Okay. Thank you for listening or watching. I'm Sable. This is Full Out Healing, and have a great day. Bye, y'all.